Raw Session number 71, September 18th, 1981. I am Ra, and I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner: could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? I am Ra. It is as previously stated, with the exception of a slight improvement in the vital energy distortions. One may note to the support group, without infringement, that it is well to aid the instrument in the reminders that while physical complex distortions remain as they are, it is not advisable to use the increased vital energies for physical complex activities, as this will take a somewhat harsh toll. Questioner: in this session, I hope to establish, by searching around with several different types of questions, a point of entry into an investigation that will be fruitful. I would first ask, is it possible to increase polarity without increasing harvestability? I am Ra. The connection between polarization and harvestability is most important in third density harvest. In this density, an increase in the serving of others or the serving of self will almost inevitably increase the ability of an entity to enjoy an higher intensity of light. Thus, in this density, we may say, it is hardly possible to polarize without increasing in harvestability. Questioner: this would probably be possible in the higher densities, such as the fifth density. Is this correct? I am Ra. In fifth density harvest, polarization has very little to do with harvestability. Questioner: would you explain the concept of working with the unmanifested being in third density to create the evolution? I am Ra. This is a many-layered question, and which striat we wish to expose is questionable. Please restate, giving any further depth of information requested, if possible. Editor's note: the word stria in the previous passage can be defined as a number of parallel features or layers. Questioner: define, please, the unmanifested being. I am Ra. We may see that you wish to pursue the deeper stratum of information. We shall, therefore, answer in a certain way, which does not exhaust the query, but is designed to move beneath the outer teachings somewhat. The unmanifested being is, as we have said, that being which exists and does its work without reference to or aid from other selves. To move into this concept, you may see the inevitable connection between the unmanifested self and the metaphysical or time-space analog of the space-time self. The activities of meditation, contemplation, and what may be called the internal balancing of thoughts and reactions are those activities of the unmanifested self, more closely aligned with the metaphysical self. Questioner: as an entity goes through the death process in third density and finds itself in time-space, it finds itself in a different set of circumstances. Would you please describe the properties or circumstances of time-space and then the process of healing of incarnative experiences that some entities encounter? I am Ra. Although this query is difficult to answer adequately due to the limitations of your space-time sound vibration complexes, we shall respond to the best of our ability. The hallmark of time-space is the inequity between time and space. In your space-time, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion. In time-space, the inequity is upon the shoulders of that property known to you as time. This property renders entities and experiences intangible in a relative sense. In your framework, each particle or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what you call the speed of light from the direction of supraluminal velocities. Thus, the time-space, or metaphysical experience, is that which is very finely tuned, and although an analog of space-time, lacking in its tangible characteristics. In these metaphysical planes, there is a great deal of what you call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases and learned teachings of a prior, as you would call it, space-time incarnation. The extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated, which must needs be absorbed before the process of healing of an entity may be accomplished. Each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as you are located in space-time in a somewhat immobile state in time. In this immobile space, the entity has been placed by the form maker and higher self, so that it may be in the proper configuration for learned teaching that which it has received in the space-time incarnation. Depending upon this time-space locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. The process involves seeing in full the experience, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, forgiving the self for all missed steps as regards the missed guideposts during the incarnation, and, finally, the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning. This is done entirely by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in space-time of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. Questioner: is the process in positive time-space identical with the process in negative time-space for this healing? I am Ra. The process in space-time of the forgiveness and acceptance is much like that in time-space, in that the qualities of the process are analogous. However, while in space-time, it is not possible to determine the course of events beyond the incarnation, but only to correct present imbalances. In time-space, upon the other hand, it is not possible to correct any unbalanced actions, but rather to perceive the imbalances and thusly forgive the self for that which is. The decisions, then, are made to set up the probabilities of correcting these imbalances in what you call future space-time experiences. The advantage of time-space is that of the fluidity of the grand overview. The advantage of space-time is that, working in darkness with a tiny candle, one may correct imbalances. Questioner: if an entity has chosen the negative polarization, are the processes of healing and review similar for the negative path? I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: are the processes that we are talking about processes that occur on many planets in our Milky Way galaxy, or do they occur on all planets, or what percentage? I am Ra. These processes occur upon all planets which have given birth to sublogoi, such as yourselves. The percentage of inhabited planets is approximately 10%. Questioner: what percentage of stars, roughly, have planetary systems? I am Ra. This is unimportant information, but harmless. Approximately 32% of stars have planets as you know them, while another 6% have some sort of clustering material which upon some densities might be inhabitable. Questioner: well, this would tell me that roughly 3% of all stars have inhabited planets. I assume then this process of evolution is in use throughout the known universe. Is this correct? I am Ra. This octave of infinite knowledge of the one Creator is as it is throughout the one infinite creation, with variations programmed by sublogoi of what you call major galaxies and minor galaxies. These variations are not significant, but may be compared to various regions of geographical location sporting various ways of pronouncing the same sound vibration complex or concept. Questioner: then it seems to me from this that the sublogos, such as our sun, uses free will to modify, only slightly, a much more general idea of created evolution, so that the general plan of created evolution, which seems then to be uniform throughout the one infinite creation, is for this process of the sublogoi to grow through the densities and, under the first distortion, find their way back to the original thought. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: then each entity is on a path that leads to the one destination. This is like many, many roads which travel through many, many places, but eventually merge into one large center. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct, but somewhat wanting in depth of description. More applicable would be the thought that each entity contains within it all of the densities and subdensities of the octave, so that in each entity, no matter whither its choices lead it, its great internal blueprint is one with all others. Thusly, its experiences will fall into the patterns of the journey back to the original logos. This is done through free will, but the materials from which choices can be made are one blueprint. Questioner: you have made the statement that pure negativity acts as a gravity well, pulling all into it. I was wondering, first, if pure positivity has precisely the same effect. Could you answer that, please? I am Ra. This is incorrect. Positivity has a much weaker effect due to the strong element of recognition of free will in any positivity approaching purity. Thus, although the negatively oriented entity may find it difficult to polarize negatively in the midst of such resounding harmony, it will not find it impossible. Upon the other hand, the negative polarization is one which does not accept the concept of the free will of other selves. Thusly, in the social complex, whose negativity approaches purity, the pull upon other selves is constant. A positively oriented entity in such a situation would desire for other selves to have their free will, and thusly would find itself removed from its ability to exercise its own free will, for the free will of negatively oriented entities is bent upon conquest. Questioner: could you please comment on the accuracy of this statement? I'm going to generally talk about the concept of magic, and first define it as the ability to create changes in consciousness at will. Is this an acceptable definition? I am Ra. This definition is acceptable in that it places upon the adept the burden it shall bear. It may be better understood by referring back to an earlier query in your measurement within this working, having to do with the unmanifested self. In magic, one is working with one's unmanifested self in body, in mind, and in spirit, the mixture depending upon the nature of the working. These workings are facilitated by the enhancement of the activation of the indigo ray energy center. The indigo ray energy center is fed, as are all energy centers, by experience, but far more than the others is fed by what we have called the disciplines of the personality. Questioner: I will state that the objective of a white magical ritual is to create a change in consciousness of a group. Is this correct? I am Ra. Not necessarily. It is possible for what you term white magic to be worked for the purpose of altering only the self or the place of working. This is done in the knowledge that to aid the self in polarization towards love and light is to aid the planetary vibration. Questioner: the change in consciousness should result in a greater distortion towards service to others, toward unity with all, and toward knowing in order to serve. Is this correct? And are there any other desired results? I am Ra. These are commendable phrases. The heart of white magic is the experience of the joy of union with the Creator. This joy will, of necessity, radiate throughout the life experience of the positive adept. It is for this reason that sexual magic is not restricted solely to the negatively oriented, polarizing adepts, but when most carefully used, has its place in high magic as it, when correctly pursued, joins body, mind, and spirit with the one infinite Creator. Any purpose which you may frame should, we suggest, take into consideration this basic union with the one infinite Creator, for this union will result in service to others of necessity. Questioner: there are, shall I say, certain rules of white magic. I will read these few that I have written, and I would like for you to comment on the philosophical basis or reasoning behind these, and add to this list any of importance that I have neglected. First, a special place of working, preferably constructed by the practitioners. Second, a signal or key, such as a ring, to summon the magical personality. Third, special clothing worn only for the workings. Fourth, a specific time of day. Fifth, a series of ritual sound vibratory complexes designed to create the desired mental distortion. Sixth, a group objective for each session. Would you comment on this list, please? I am Ra. To comment upon this list is to play the mechanic which views the instruments of the orchestra and adjusts and tunes the instruments. You will note these are mechanical details. The art does not lie herein. The one item of least import is what you call the time of day. This is important in those experiential nexi wherein the entities search for the metaphysical experience without conscious control over the search. The repetition of workings gives this search structure. In this particular group, the structure is available without the need for inevitable sameness of times of working. We may note that this regularity is always helpful. Questioner: you stated in a previous session that Ra searched for some time to find a group such as this one. I would assume that this search was for the purpose of communicating the law of one. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is partially correct. We also, as we have said, wished to attempt to make reparation for distortions of this law set in motion by our naive actions of your past. Questioner: Can you tell me if we have covered the necessary material to this point to, if published, make the necessary reparations for the naive actions? I am Ra. We mean no disrespect for your service, but we do not expect to make full reparations for these distortions. We may, however, offer our thoughts in the attempt. The attempt is far more important to us than the completeness of the result. The nature of your language is such that what is distorted cannot, to our knowledge, be fully undistorted, but only illuminated somewhat. Questioner: when you say you searched for this group, what do you mean? What was your process of search? I ask this question to understand more the illusion of time and space. I am Ra. Consider the process of one who sees the spectrograph of some complex of elements. It is a complex paint sample, let us say, for ease of description. We of Ra knew the needed elements for communication, which had any chance of enduring. We compared our color chip to many individuals and groups over a long span of your time. Your spectrograph matches our sample. In response to your desire to see the relationship betwixt space-time and time-space, may we say that we conducted this search in time-space, for in this illusion, one may quite readily see entities as vibratory complexes and groups as harmonics within vibratory complexes. Questioner: I see the most important product of this communication being a vehicle of partial enlightenment for those incarnate now who have become aware of their part in their own evolutionary process. Am I correct in this assumption? I am Ra. You are correct. We may note that this is the goal of all artifacts and experiences which entities may come into contact with, and is not only the property of Ra or this contact. We find that this instrument has neglected to continue to remind itself of the need for holding some portion of energy back for reserve. This is recommended as a portion of the inner program to be reinstated, as it will lengthen the number of workings we may have. This is acceptable to us. The transferred energy grows quite low. We must leave you shortly. Is there a brief query at this time? Questioner: is there anything that we can do to improve the contact or to make the instrument more comfortable? I am Ra. You are conscientious. Remain most fastidious about the alignments of the appurtenances. We thank you. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and in the glorious light of the infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.
Andre?
Oh, okay. Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Let us open our hearts with kindness and love for one another, letting us be of service to each other.
Outstanding. So take up the floor. Who wants to express something, a thought or question, or by all means.
I have a question. What was the original thought when he was defining the original thought? What was the actual? I don't know if I've ever, if I did hear it, I didn't stick.
Ed, you're muted, honey.
Oh.
Ed had his thing muted, yeah.
Sorry, I am. That was the thought, wasn't it? I am. That's what you wanted to know.
Huh. Well, that's original.
Well, basically, the original thought is another way of saying the one infinite Creator.
I see. So just the realization that you are, and that you are somewhere in something, and just there, that's the original thought.
I thought the whole point
the Creator.
Yeah, I thought the whole point was that the Creator, to experience itself, you know, it had to ask the question of, what am I, essentially? So in saying I am, how does God define itself? So, you know, it essentially splintered into every possibility of everything. So I'm assuming it will finish the sentence at some point, but to start off with, it was just I am.
Yeah, that's a big concept.
Well, I am
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
Everything is creation. So, Trevor, I know you have a remark. I seen it. There you go.
Yeah, there's a fantastic one from the Bible. I was just pulling up the direct quote so I didn't misinterpret it. But it's when Moses is talking to the bush and he's asking about when he goes and visits the Israelites, what he's to say to them if they're to believe him. Hey, I'm some random guy and I've been speaking with your God and he's got a message for you. How are they going to know that I'm talking to the real thing and not somebody else? And God says to Moses, I am who I am. Where is it? I put up the wiki page, so it's a bit of a mess here now. But I think somebody will know what I'm talking about. He says, say to them that the I am has sent you. So when we say I am and we think I am, we think I is in self and then am is in a part of or doing something. But that original thought is the initial spark that created it all. It was the movement upon the face of the waters. And of course, the waters is metaphor for the unconscious or the collective unity of the logos. So with untouched reality, just pure potential, the first movement was I am, which then started the first thought process, thus photonic emission. Thus the Lord said, let there be light. So there's also a really fantastic episode by Brian Scott on the original thought. And it's definitely one that you should go back to on a regular basis as the first episode of Law of One, where I'd like to describe Ra as DJing around the group, where he's kind of come into the circle of the people and he's gone, okay, let's try out with the instrument. That works well. Let's try out with Don. Yeah, that doesn't work very well. Let's try out with the scribe. I can't remember his name, And he goes, yeah, that's not too bad. But while he's switching bodies and checking the frequencies of the individuals in the group, he's saying a few things in between, like just checking it and testing, mic test, So, and one of them, I think it's the instrument that he lands in. He then talks about the original one thought, and how we're all just dancing thoughts upon the one original thought. And it's a beautiful poetic piece that has a lot of meaning just jam-packed into it that you can just keep coming back to from all these different questions and go, holy crap, there's even more there,
Just so everybody's tracking, just check your mic before you go to talk, because I muted everyone. I mute us so that when someone's speaking, it's not an overlap or anything like that, and we can hear the person's full thought. So I'm not doing it to be a jerk. Just unmute yourself when you're ready to say something.
Yeah. I mean, there's many different ways of interpreting it. In the LL archives, there's different ways that it's used. Like often it's as the one infinite creator, but it also says, like for example, here in 1985 or 1986. It said, thus each seeks in a unique fashion to find the one original thought. In a unique fashion, manifests some portion of that thought within the illusion life pattern, which is apparent. So, like, one of the ways that they talk about the original thought is kind of like the original intention of the one infinite creator. So like when they talk about living in harmony with the original thought, they usually mean like, are you living in the way that the one infinite creator intended? Like, for example, like, why did the one infinite creator make third density beings live on planets? And then, like, well, on my own meditations on it was, well, if you have all of these, like, say, second density entities, then the third density entities are kind of like gardeners and are supposed to like help the ecosystem and have a nice diversity to it. Whereas, so if like people are, say, destroying the ecosystem, then they're going away from that original thought, and they're no longer in alignment with it.
The other thing about this is that has anyone read any of the stuff about ascension and all the I think his name is Malzadak, or I can't remember how you say it. And but a lot of that talks about how, when you personally say the words "I am," you are kind of like making a statement of, creating your own reality and what you are as an entity. And if you think about that whole kind of thing as I am being the original thought, then we're all co-creators. That's it. Yeah, that. That we are all kind of the one. Like we are all co-creators, and we have to know what we are. Like I am this. So when you do that, when you define yourself, you're returning to that original thought, because you are defining your experience for the creator, I suppose.
Not that it's really a huge digression from anything anybody said, and I apologize. It's been a few years since I've read Law of One. And I seem to recall Rock pretty much verbatim stating the original thought was simply love, for lack of a better word, and going into, no, this isn't the density of understanding. And, the word love itself, as we understand it, isn't really a perfect way of explaining it. It's the closest thing that we can come to. And basically, in exploring that infinite source of love, we find our way back to the creator.
Yeah, that's what I see it as well. I am is a pure statement of loving acceptance.
Okay.
From a metaphysical standpoint, he's saying, I am manyness, yet I am nothing. That's the metaphysical.
I agree. That comes down to what Ra was talking about, the unmanifested self as well.
And the thing that Andre had read from LNL research agreed with what we read tonight in 7113, where it says the one blueprint internally we all have. And because Andre had said it was the illusion life pattern. So that sounds like that blueprint that we all share.
I really like how the one blueprint thing really ties in with the whole kind of multi-dimensional, all of the incarnations, time being an illusion, and all of the incarnations essentially being kind of all under that one blueprint. And then, with the time that you're in the time space is essentially kind of refining the plan, I suppose, like, getting the blueprint closer to its refining it more. And then when you come into space time, that's when you actually kind of put the blueprint into work, I suppose.
Yeah, and when we think of a blueprint, we see the architect at their drafting table constructing this drawing that's supposed to represent the finished product. And can you imagine the blueprint of the creator using an infinite array of test subjects, that we are, and I say that lovingly. It's it's quite a blueprint.
I found another quote about describing the original thought in 82:10, and it said, I am Ra. This is the plan of the one infinite creator. The one original thought is the harvest of all previous, if you would use this term, experience of the creator by the creator. As it decides to know itself, it generates itself into that plenum, full of the glory and the power of the one infinite creator, which is manifested to your perception as space or outer space. Each generation of this knowing begets a knowing which has the capacity, through free will, to choose methods of knowing itself. Therefore, gradually, step by step, the creator becomes that which may know itself, and the portions of the creator partake less purely in the power of the original word or thought. This is for the purpose of refinement of the one original thought. The creator does not properly create as much as it experiences itself.
That's the manyness and the nothingness.
So, my interpretation of this is Ra explains that this is not the first creation. This is like at least the third or something, and that so each kind of creation starts with its own original thought based on the lessons from the previous thoughts. Like one of the things Ra mentions about this creation is that in this creation there is a male and female, which was considered to increase polarization. Like not everyone is androgynous, which is apparently what was happening in some previous creations.
I also really like the idea of the change of octaves, that, you know, once we all create oneness, then essentially, like, the creator itself goes through that period of time space rewriting out a new blueprint before it starts all over again.
Andre, can you clarify for us? I assume when you say the previous creation and this creation, you're talking about octaves?
No, I'm not talking about octaves. I'm talking about kind of big bangs.
Yeah,
I thought that's when the octave started.
Exactly. So like the previous octave generated free will, but it wasn't part of the last octave. So this creation is born with free will.
No, I'll find the quote, but I'm pretty sure basically they describe this in multiple places, that from each big bang to each big crunch is one heartbeat of the one infinite creator. So they're talking about these original thoughts as kind of what started this particular expansion, you know.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that, but I thought that the point was at the expansion, everything was at first density, and it's taken everything to go through the octave to get to the big crunch point when it all comes back to oneness. And then at that point, you know, we explode out again and we start a whole new octave, you know. So because you know, it goes from, you know, one to the end of the octave before we reach oneness again, you know.
It's just that those octaves are kind of an independent phenomenon, in my understanding, in terms of that, like after the eighth, you know, eighth is locality and then ninth is planets, and you know, it's like the personal incarnational journey is a little bit different in that respect.
See, I get confused in this because I feel like there's lots of other things that are saying that you got many dimensions, like many dimensions, going up 300 odd dimensions, but you haven't got that many octaves. You've only that many densities, and the densities react to the notes or to the colors in the same spectrum that we have. And then when you get to the end of that spectrum, that harmonic period, then you get a new octave. And, you know, the sacred geometries thing, every single thing fits all the way down. Like if we as entities go through all of those before you get to the same octave, to the next octave, then surely so would the creator. But then dimensions, you can have all of those same densities at every dimension. So these two terms get confused quite a lot in amongst the whole literature. But I think that with what Ra talks about, he speaks about that. I can't read on the messages. How do you have the messages? Anyway, sorry.
Well, yeah, I recall Ra saying there was infinite densities.
Yep. So Desiree popped up a couple of good ones in chat there from Quo. The first one, of course, being the reason for offering love, appreciation, a blessing, and thanksgiving to the Infinite One is that the entity within the incarnation is attempting to form its vibratory frequency more and more like that of the vibrational frequency of the one great original thought, which is love. And also, we are those at Quo. Thank you for tying up and finishing this session. The seed of any thought is thought itself. The Logos is the original thought. All thoughts spring from the Logos, so all thoughts spring forth from the original thought. Unconditional love is the essence of the Logos. Therefore, the seed of every thought is love. So every thought is the thought of I am, and the essence of the I am is love. I mean, that doesn't say the I am, but if we're going to tie it back into the previous conversation that we've been having.
Which Mitch nailed it.
Mm-hmm. So So you're talking about the octaves, they're within each density, correct? You have to, am I correct in that? So every density has octaves, and now how many octaves per density? We don't know. Do we know?
I saw it somewhere said that each density does have an infinite array within it. It's just they break it up into like 7 main
Right.
stria, like that word he used in his reading,
Mm-hmm.
stria or levels or layers. So each, like the third density has 7 main levels within it, but each of those 7 has another 7. And then
Okay.
each one of those has another 7. And
So it's a infinity.
It's fractalized.
It's infinity.
Yeah. Creator is infinite in whatever creator does.
Mhm.
It only is infinity.
Mhm.
It may only be able to express infinity. That's part of why it experiments with all these different choices. It's seeking a way to not see infinity, which like concepts like hell and sin are so restrictive.
Mhm.
It's seeking a way to not have an infinity in a way, just to understand itself.
Mhm.
If you want to look in the chat, Andre put in there something if he wants to read it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was just the quote that Robert was just referring to. Yeah, it says here, within your great octave of existence, which we share with you, there are 7 octaves or densities. Within each density, there are 7 subdensities. Within each subdensity, 7 sub-subdensities, and so on infinitely. So just what Robert was saying.
The number 7 is a thing.
Yeah. And well, like I'm not 100% sure that like 7 is the only way of characterizing it, but it is how Ra characterizes it.
Yeah, I think the you know, because he tried to bring everything back to the colors for the chakras and then the musical notes, and you know they all work in octaves, don't they? So you have the 7 notes and then you have the 3 sharp notes or whatever. So that would be the 1 to essentially 10 being completion back to oneness, and then the last 7 to 10 being the different kind of organizational phases of the creator.
And not to be adding confusion, but it was also stated somewhere in there how even though we are said to have the 7 chakras, technically those in energy regions higher than us are viewing those as 5 chakras, because the root and the crown are more like thermometers and barometers. They're just measuring instruments.
Well, yeah, that and they're conduits, aren't they? So you pull in the prana, the kind of red energy through the root chakra, and then the crown chakra is above us. That's what you connect to outwardly. So
but there's more.
Yeah,
though.
like
the 7.
Yeah, the whole 12 thing. The whole 12 thing's another thing as well that is brought up a lot.
Right.
The above our kind of crown chakra, then you've got like the Christus body and the Buddha body, and going up to kind of where you are the creator, essentially, I suppose, like all the way up to when you've already connected to oneness, and we are exist at all of those different levels simultaneously, because time's a big illusion. So it's just how all of that stuff's kind of all. That's another thing that he said. What was it he said? How did he say it? It was
Well, he does kind of mention it in just before what I was just quoting. It said the term density is what you would call mathematical. The closest analogy is that of music, whereby after 7 notes on your Western type of scale, the 8th note begins a new octave. But if you look into Western music, there's actually 12 semitones. And then the 7-note scale is based on like skipping some of the semitones. And so you can characterize it as 12. And like in my understanding, like the 12 note thing works better or more simply for if you include like locality and planet, and then because universe would be 12.
Yeah, I think that all of these things work in threes going all the way through. So, you know, 9 for our third density experience is probably all the chakras we'd have any access to anyway. And then I suppose the next step up would be the other 3.
Yeah. So like I know I talked to some extraterrestrials, and they have the 3 fingers on each hand. And so like for them, it's like a base 6 reality. And so they see the third and the 6 chakra, 6 densities as gateway densities. Like, because in the third density, you're kind of choosing, making a really big choice between service to self and service to others, or, repeating the cycle. And then in the 6th density, you have all of these intuitive abilities. Well, because the third eye, right? It's the 6th chakra. And so you with your third eye, you can see basically the entire spectrum above and the entire spectrum below, like the hextive, I guess, because it's not based on X 8.
That's interesting, Andre. You're saying because of the 3 fingers on their hands, or is that related to like what we call a Babylonian system of measurement? Or I think they're using 60.
Yeah, they were using 60 there. But I don't know if it like it was if you look at their number system, it's base 10. But then it's just that it instead of going up to 100, it goes up to 60. And then it repeats after 60.
And we use it now to express our time.
Yeah, we do.
So it's related somehow.
Yeah, it's a superior highly composite number, and so is 6.
Yeah, the sexagesimal or sexagesimal by the Babylonians, and they used to use their knuckles to count out, and then would set those knuckles on a single knuckle. So you count out 3 on one finger, and then that would be your first knuckle. Count out, after you do all your hand, put one knuckle there. And then once you add them all up, you've got 60 across your hand. So they used to count to 60 on their hands of 10 fingers, using more than just their digits, but the knuckles as well. So it's really interesting because that's like, how does 10 become 60? Because we think in terms of decimal, 5s and 10s, but they're dealing in 6s and 12s and 60s. It's a fascinating one. And then you've got the whole thing about 6 and sex and the spells and magic behind that, hex magic and everything else that you were just mentioning too. It's a huge, huge thing. Numbers and the law of number, I love it.
And when you're looking at the whole kind of like light bodies and the macabre fields and things as well, 12's a much more kind of understandable number to put into the whole system. None of it works with 10s.
Well, interestingly, it works with both. So in the Giza pyramid, you'll find that the union between the decimal meter, the imperial foot, and the Egyptian consented measuring stick, I can't remember what they're called, but all 3 of them come together to map out a fraction of the global perimeter or the measurement around the globe, which then is a fraction or a percentage of the speed of light. So it was a point in time where the union of information of number was broken into 3 pieces and then disseminated around the world in order to protect itself while we went through that dark period.
Robert, were you going to say something before?
I was going to say, when we're talking about, like, thank you, Trevor, for the knuckle description of the counting sexagesimal. And I was just going to say, we can praise and thank Creator for the thumb in this logos, because this is a new experiment that has been undergone in this solar system, and other systems have seen it and are taking it on in theirs also. The thumb. And it's allowed us to have those number expressions we use now. Thank you, Desiree.
Here for you, my friend.
I noticed in the 2005 December 18th, they actually talk about a 12 chakra system. It says the subtleties of the 12 chakra system can be very helpful to students of metaphysics. It begins the same way as does the Western system, the first chakra being connected with issues of sexuality and survival. I'll post the link in the chat.
I have a question on the unmanifested being. Is that when somebody dies? Then what is it actually? What is the unmanifested being? Simple terms.
Your true
The
self.
original.
Your true self.
Okay.
That has to be discovered.
So the
Infinity.
So can this unmanifested being manifest?
When we think about psychology and that type of thing, we in the West have the conscious, subconscious, and the unconscious, but it's I have a lot more respect for models that kind of eliminate the subconscious and recognize it as what can be easily described as a wave on a ocean. So we are the wave, and that's our conscious thought. And whenever we're thinking with our sub or unconscious, both basically the same thing, because there's no real barriers between any of them. But we're basically going from the wave and ducking down into infinity and then ducking back up into ourself. But we're stuck in the wave thinking that we're separate from the rest of it, whereas that's just the illusion. So there's no actual difference between conscious mind and the unconscious mind. That's what we call the veil.
Mm-hmm.
And also to achieve that, you have to go through the system. You have to go through the blueprint. There's no other way. That's why he recommends to do one of the systems. It's a system that's been used for ages. And that is how you manifest your true self, is through the system. That's called the straight and narrow.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
And
that
then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm good. I'll
I-
speak up after.
I feel that I recall kind of Ra making statements along the lines of that there are countless paths out there, and while there is nothing wrong with following any of the other paths that countless cultures have followed, it's not really necessary. And there's a path of just pure seeking, and that ties in the value of meditation, all this, that even someone that has nothing, that's never been exposed to any of these prior systems of thought, as sacred as they may be to many, can still find their way simply by taking a moment, sitting with themselves and searching for what's inside, because we're all fractals of this one great creator.
Mhm.
And this whole concept of separation and division is in and of itself one of the biggest parts of the illusion. The entirety of it all exists within each and every one of us, and every rock, every dog, every insect. And that's kind of the beauty of all of this, because it brings it all back together.
Yeah.
I was going to point
you're
out where
It's definitely possible to do it. It's just that it will take longer because of the fact that your egos, you can't see the egos, and the egos will inhibit you from actually seeing what you need to see. Yes, it can be done, but the systems that the universe has placed is a sure system, but it's a little harder, but without any kind of struggle, you don't get the ease.
in law of 171.5, Raw defines
That's what I was just about to say. Go ahead.
unmanifested being, and it says the unmanifested being, as we have said, that being which exists and does its work without reference to or aid from other selves. To move into this concept, you may see the inevitable connection between the unmanifested self and the metaphysical or time-space analog of the space-time self. The activities of meditation, contemplation, and what may be called the internal balancing of thoughts and reactions are those activities of the unmanifested self more closely aligned with the metaphysical self. So exactly what Mitch was saying, basically.
It's true. It's just that he's left out a lot. And that was for a purpose. But your egos are something that is real. They will inhibit you from seeing what you need to see. I'm just filling in because that's what I'm supposed to do.
Mhm.
Accept it or not. It's okay.
Who
Can I
left
say
out a
something?
lot?
So I think she was talking about what Mitch said, but
Oh.
okay. So you're not fully getting rid of the ego, obviously, as of right now. I mean, you have an ego still, I do, everyone else in here at this moment. But we still like just even the meditation, contemplation, whatever, it still brings us closer. I do this every night, every day, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I don't really, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I'm not quite getting where the disconnect is.
No, can I say something?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I get what, kind of probably a small part of what she's saying about the egos, because what happens is that you have to allow something unique and maybe something outside of the box that you did not think was supposed to happen, gonna happen, or was, possible to happen in order to realize in advance. And like they said, that the blueprint is in every single one of us. So I've worked in my life, I've worked with blueprints almost in every job I've had. I've built bridges, I've built cranes, I've built all kinds of stuff, and I've seen all kinds of blueprints. And I know, if I know anything about blueprints, it's this: they change. Nothing is ever 100% until it is R&D'd for 20 years in the field, and nothing comes back to us and we don't get sued for design failure. Raw came back to us with the desire to profess the law of one and for restitution for past mistakes. They changed the blueprint. Everything's getting tweaked a little bit here and there. And we have to kind of let our ego down and say, okay, yeah, I might have been an archaeologist or a physicist or whatever for the last 50 years. And this information now changes everything that my education is based on. That's okay. You have to be okay with that. You can't let your ego say, well, I'm going to hide this archaeological information because I don't want it to, my entire life's work to be for, a failure or in vain. But it's actually not. Even when you do that, you're doing more to advance. By admitting past failures, you're doing more to advance us forward in the proper direction, and you're letting your ego down and you're advancing yourself into service for others, which helps the rest of the world. Does that make any sense?
Right, because you
Very much.
recognized. So once you recognize, yes, then it reconciles. So that's true, right? That's how you have to work the ego. But not many people can do that.
Right.
No, it takes a certain mindset.
Right, correct. I agree.
And Fred,
Just,
I really like how you said that, how the blueprint that the human entities are using does change over time. But I'm under the impression that the blueprint of creator is kind of set, because it's so infinite, it's so awe-inspiring, we can't even imagine that.
Blueprints are always, they're set in their direction and they're set in their goal.
Yeah.
So if we
And
say
it's
that the
within us
blueprint is
all in a certain set fashion. It's just how we're reading the blueprint and applying it to our existence, which is that which changes. And the
Correct.
ego is in the way of all of this up to a certain point when we can no longer be subjected to its disorienting fashion.
That's correct. You're very correct. The blueprint can never be changed because the way you came down, you have to go back up the same way. That's a universal blueprint. Now, it's going to be different based on each individual because each of journeys are different. That's going to be the difference, but the blueprint is from the universe. That doesn't change. Everyone must evolve.
I want to jump in very quickly and comment on a piece that you added as well, Alia, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, about the, and this is one that I see happen a lot in Law of One groups. We've got to remember that Ra doesn't actually tell them everything, of course. So when he answers a question, he's giving them information that he's deeming necessary that won't affect their ability to have free will. So he leaves out bits of information, and there's certain parts and pieces that you can definitely see that. And there's one or two that come to mind where Don walks away from it with the impression from me going, yes, I got that. And I'm sitting there reading it going, I think you're missing a couple of pieces of that, if you know what I mean. So it's a good part
That's
to
true.
keep in mind that it's not, Ra is not the word of God. He is just the same as us, and he is liable for mistakes, or it is, or she is, or whatever you want.
Yep.
Yes. He definitely leaves out a lot. And those of you who heard who I am, my job now is to give you the missing pieces. It's time. But I can only do it if you ask.
Well,
Because
Let's hear the missing pieces.
you got it, girl. Go for it.
have to ask.
I'm asking.
Well, I don't know what you want to know.
Oh,
But
yeah,
see,
there's-
you see what I'm saying? That information was for that time. We are in a cycle which harvest is right around the corner. So the question is, what are you all doing to make yourself harvestable? Because it's not just, I'm going to love, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. There has to be the system that's going to make you become conscious that you have a higher self and a lower self. The system makes you conscious that there's duality, yet it isn't, but you won't know that until you get past 6 density or 6 sphere.
Well, I just was because I've read a bunch of the LL archives, and they very rarely mention ego at all. And well, I did put in some of the places. Usually it's the humans or the third density entities talking about ego. And well, one of the things they mention is that it means different things to different people. Well, one of the best quotes where they actually use it in kind of not just responding. Oh, well, it's still a response, but if entities who can see beyond the existence of the individual ego within each entity and see the creator within all and begin to form an open-hearted bonding with all such entities, this bonding can serve as a kind of fulcrum by which the energies of separation may begin to be lifted away from those who are divided, each from the other, and make it more possible for such entities to also be able to enjoy and transmit this higher level of vibration that is now engulfing your planet.
Right.
So yeah, recognizing that we are all one and then loving others as the infinite creator is kind of the transcendent quality. But they also say that The ego death is that which is a natural outgrowth of such progression of spiritual seeking. However, we would remind each entity that dealing with the material world is ever present, and the ego death is that which is symbolic in nature and does not allow the pure pursuit of the spiritual path, as seeking only that which is of a higher level than the mundane world. For each yogi, shall we say, must needs eat its meal of the daily round of activities and feed the inner being that is the higher self, or higher self with the spiritual food, while it feeds its own body with the produce of the mundane world. So basically, like, you will always still have an ego, because, well, you're incarnate and you need to eat. And so it's always a balance, and you have to love that aspect of yourself too. You have to love all aspects of everyone.
Uh,
True. You
Sorry, go
will
ahead.
always have an ego, but your true self is your true personality. Your ego that you're dealing with now is your false personality. And maybe I'm not supposed to give this information out yet. Maybe you're not ready, because what you're reading is an intro. He did an intro back then. But again, we're in some very serious times, very close times. And my information is only for people who really want to know, who want to go to the next level. But if this feels comfortable, then it's beautiful. If it feels comfortable right here, then beautiful.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people, maybe not so many that are right here, but I know at least a few have never even been introduced to the material.
Right.
So for them, you need to be kind of get an introduction, obviously, right, before you dive right into the deep depths of everything, because then they wouldn't be able to understand.
True. That's why I said, only if you're ready, then you can ask me. But if you're not ready, what I'm going to speak, you're not going to really understand anyway. You see? So that's why I'm just sitting. If you have a question, I can answer. But if this is where you're at, then whatever I say, really, it's not going to make any sense.
Well, not for everybody. Some people might understand. So I say freely share. And if they do, then good, great.
Yeah, if you're called upon, by the one infinite creator within you to share something you feel is of service, you're open to do that. And anyone is open to do that. And I'm sure a lot of us here are do meditation and are also connected with our higher self within, and can also answer questions when someone requests from us.
Mitch, I believe you had something to say.
Yeah, a couple things. Just adding on to that a bit. I think we're all here to study the same material. And with that being said, if there's something that you want to share, I don't think it's a violation of any of our free will by opening up and sharing that, because we all came here together as a group to learn what we can. The other thing that kind of struck me is, prior to getting into Law of One, I got very, very into psychedelic philosophy. And when you start hanging out with a lot of these groups, reading up, one of the big things they chase is ego death, ego death, ego death. And for me, that's kind of where I started drifting away from it, because when you really look at it, we absolutely have to have the ego to survive in this density. Without it, there's no separation between me and the couch that I'm sitting on. Well, if I can't make that distinction, I can't feed myself, I can't bathe myself, I can't do the absolute minimum things necessary to survive in this density. Red ray absolutely fails, then everything on top of it fails as well. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon is going back to the blueprint discussion. I think we tend to see we hear the word blueprint, we think of a two-dimensional document. But when you go back to Ra and constantly saying this is not the density of understanding, okay, well, maybe blueprint isn't the perfect word. We have this magnificent three-dimensional, four-dimensional structure of choices in front of us. And anytime Ra is asked a forward-facing question, he starts talking about the vortices of possibility of this nexus. So there are many, many different ways the blueprint may all lead back to one path, and the ending of the blueprint may be an inevitability, but there are an infinite number of ways that we can choose to explore that, experience that, and ultimately develop our own spirits or souls, whatever you want to call it, to get back to that point. But it all comes together. The body doesn't exist without the soul. The soul can't inhabit something without having the body. And we have to have our mind to make it all work together.
Next thing.
Yeah.
Can I also add something there about
Absolutely.
the
Go ahead.
blueprint, about the blueprint thing? When I envisioned them saying blueprint, I don't know how many people have ever worked with blueprints, but I worked at actually the largest crane manufacturer in the United States at one time, and they had some really neat blueprints where there were different layers of the crane, and each layer had a transparent vellum, and on that vellum would be that layer's electrical diagram if that was the electrical blueprint, or hydraulic diagram if it was the hydraulic blueprint. And you would have to turn the page to see the next level, and then turn the page to see the next level. If you got the full blueprint with the 3-dimensional drawing of it, you could see the layout on the side of where things were, but you couldn't see everything depending on your frame of reference, which had to change when you were looking at the 3-dimensional image. So what you had was, depending on what level you were on and depending on what blueprint you were looking at, determine what section and part of the crane you were even able to see. So if there's only one single layer that we're able to see because of this veil, then 90% of the blueprint we're clueless about, other than by interpretation and by extrapolation and what little tiny bit we know about our physics.
But I think that's absolutely necessary, though, because without that division, as Ra explains, prior to this, to what we have now, there's no progress that's going to be made. If we come to this incarnation knowing what it's all about, we're going to sit around and we're not going to do much because there's no incentive to progress. So at the end of the day, I think there's a lot to be grateful for when it comes to not being able to see the full blueprint.
Nope, you're absolutely right. It would make us all, we wouldn't want to do anything. Well, we already know this. There's more to this. This is just this is just a Truman Show.
I know they said something about progressing too fast by just if we knew everything earlier, and I can't remember when though, but there was something along those lines, and it just
or sitting on our laurels and just waiting.
I was going to say something about the kind of links the ego thing to the blueprint thing. The first instruction is free will, right? If the blueprint's all set in stone and everything is this is going to happen, this is going to happen, we've got the blueprints, then where's free will? That's destiny. That's everything's set in stone. You can't make any changes. Then there's no choices. There's no growth. There's no free will. And really, when you're incarnated in this body, the thing that makes those choices, that makes that controls free will, is the ego. So without the choices that you can make to kind of get to the other place, to use your free will to go through your incarnation, the ego is essentially what guides those choices, right?
What's a superego?
I think that this terminology of ego and superego is Freudian and not really law of one.
Right. Well, that's what I was thinking, because Freudian, id, ego, superego, and all that stuff. And that's human stuff. Now we're going into something totally different. So there's got to be some different kind of explanation for it all. Because
I think when you look at it, you've got like the oversoul, the mass consciousness that you're part of, but then when you're incarnated, you've got this consciousness, and the personality is some kind of mergence between the two. What you've grown in this incarnation to learn and to exercise your free will, and then the blueprint, I suppose, would be the oversoul and what you need to learn in this incarnation. That's why you have these personalities. Surely that's what the the catalyst of when you're born and the body you've got basically is, right?
So technically then, wouldn't it be more true that the actual ego would be the archetypal mind instead of the ego?
Well, I think of it more as kind of the like a fraction, like what you have here in this life. The ego, for example, the ego doesn't really know anything about the other selves. You know, it might discover something as it goes on, but as it is, you know, it's just it's all the experiences that we've had in this incarnation, and it doesn't want to really accept there's anything else, which goes back to what priestess, I can't say the name, but she was saying about how the ego gets in the way of things and it doesn't want you to recognize, you know, and you have to kind of move past that kind of walls that it builds to stop you from seeing the truth before you kind of sit. And I think the whole raw material is a really good way of stepping past the ego, because, you know, when you think about the whole process of reincarnation and the amount of lives that you've lived and all of the different, you know, components that you're a part of, it's very easy for, you know, well, how much do I really matter? Like the person that I think I am in this incarnation. Really, I'm just part of much bigger process, you know, and that's me now. The most I'm ever going to hope to do is to influence and polarize the whole in a certain amount. I'm never going to be, you know, I'm not going to expect to be me for eternity. Does that make sense?
I found a quote that seems to tie together what Ed and Desiree were saying. It says, you carry the blueprint of all things within and the potential to activate any or all of this knowledge, that you are protected from burning yourself out in discovering these fiery truths before times is to be expected in a universe where there is the possibility of advancing. The Creator has not hidden these truths in order to cause hardships, but in order to prevent premature awareness. Each entity is intended to open itself to transformation in this natural way, so that there shall be no loss of incarnation that is not necessary. And I think Amanda was mentioning that about the archetypes, and that is kind of the correct, or the LL way of thinking about the blueprint, is that the blueprint is the archetypical journey, like the tarot cards. And so and the reason, like they talk about this often, that there's various layers of kind of you could call it deception, but it's basically layers of creation, and we are aware of a certain layer, and then we forgive and love that layer, and then once we've kind of fully forgiven and loved that layer, then we realize, oh, this was actually just like a wallpaper. What's under here? And then we find out that there's a whole other world under there that we can forgive and love as well.
So technically this would take millions of years to go through if you're so desired to go through that. My thing is, when we were reading that, it kind of hit me a little off, is when, okay, we go through all this and we get to the end, and the Creator or the Force could just say, okay, you're done, we don't need you anymore. That kind of, I mean, if I read that correctly, that kind of just, yeah, you thought, well, we did all this work and we want to get there, and now you're going to just fade us out of the picture. I don't know if that's correct in what I was reading, but if you haven't, kind of just, you know, me, I go, well, I don't know if I like that.
But that's the whole getting to kind of seventh density. You know, you lose all the sense of self anyway. You lose everything of who you are, and you just become one with everything. Now, bringing it back to the octaves as well, in the Seth material, he talks about how once you go back into oneness and you all become part of the Creator again, and the new octave starts again all afresh, that the part that you were, the soul that you were, continues on into the next octave, and all of the changes that the Creator makes before starting again, you know, you yourself, this incarnation right here will have some tiny small change on the Creator's plan for the next one. So you and your actions in your life directly influences the birth of the next universe, just in a really tiny way.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to respond to Amanda, and so that's actually a good point that you have there. That I mean, if you just very quickly progress through all of the densities, eventually you would, merge with the one infinite creator from at least our perspective here. And that's actually the reason why they don't rush anyone. That's why they say that, if your most deeper inner calling is to repeat the third density, go ahead. That's fine. There's no rush. It's completely okay to continue in this for as long as you feel inside is the best for you. Like only move on, like, do the work of moving on to fourth density if that is your deeper calling, that, you want to move on to this more harmonious existence.
I explained it because I thought, well, we go through all this and it's over. I'm like, oh no, that ain't working for me. That's not working for me.
Yeah.
I'll be very vocal about it.
Yeah. Oh, well, like even if you were to progress through the densities, it would still take trillions of years. So
Right.
you don't have to
Well,
worry about
if
it
you think
happening
about
anytime
it,
soon.
Okay, Earth, we die. We think of it, a lot of people think of it as absolute, and so if you can go eternity, that's like eternity. So that's cool. I think that's really cool, because who wants to really die a final death? You know what I'm saying? Because there's the death and then there's a final death and all this. So I don't know if too many people that I've taken care of want to die. So, being a nurse and going through this with people, because there isn't too many people that actually tell me they want to die. They just have accepted it. So eternity to me is like, great, hey, I got a lot of stuff to do. So I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to jump in very quickly and say I really, really want to die. Not anytime soon, because I really want to live at the same time. The both of them are just fascinating and marvelous.
That is that connection that we're in. We're gonna die. And and people are fearful of death, and so if they actually understand and look at something different like this and think, oh yeah, there is something else, maybe people wouldn't fear so much, because we're taught to fear that. I mean, we are, or like, you're going to go to hell if you did this. And so we're fearful of it, and I know a lot of older people are fearful of that. So if they aren't, maybe I don't know if they're lying or what, but in my experience of working as a nurse in a nurse's aide for how many years, like my entire life, just about, I have not found, there was only one woman that asked me if it was okay to die. And I said, well, how do you feel about it? And she said, well, I'm not sure. I said, well, for me, I'm going to tell you, it's okay, but I've had that asked to me a few times. And, I had to become comfortable with that, because when you first get out of school, you're not as comfortable, and then you learn. But like I said, if people understood and accepted and found a different way, death wouldn't be so fearful.
Yeah, that reminds me, in one of these groups, there was a hospice worker that joined at some point, and she was explaining that in her practice, there were often cases where people were just kind of like hanging on, and so they had to, like, call the relatives, and then, like, they're like, okay, you've got to come in and say your goodbyes and tell them it's okay to pass on, and this is just like a regular thing. And then, like, once they come, and then they tell them, okay, we love you, we know it's okay, you can go now, and they die within minutes, even though they were hanging on for weeks, when, like, there was no physical reason why they were still alive.
Right.
That exact thing happened to my mom's mom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're going to die when your time to die.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm just have to be real, let you know. And that if relatives came, that was a part of the plan. But there's no delay. That time comes, you're going. And how the plan was when you came down is going to play out. If it was meant for people to come in, that was part of the plan. But no one stalls death.
No one what?
No one stalls death.
Oh, well, I don't know. That sounds contradicting to the LO archives where they say there's free will, and you know, basically we do have some plans, or they're kind of loose plans of what we want to accomplish in our life, but because we're interacting with all these other people who have free will, things don't always go the way that we planned.
Well, and that's the very nature of Catalyst too, isn't it? We pre-program what we have the opportunity to experience while we're here, but none of it's preset. We can choose to ignore that catalyst. We can choose to accomplish nothing here, not recommending it, but it's certainly an option. So I don't think, as far as law one goes, the concept of determinism really fits in real well. Nothing is really preordained. We have an infinite number of choices in front of us.
But death of the physical.
Right. Death is there's a number. And you're not going to go before, and you're not going to go, you can't stall it. So whatever happens in your life is because it's been planned. You planned it when you came. So that's part of the illusion. And then free will is an illusion. I can't tell you what it is because then it would be infringement, but that's an illusion. Free will is a distortion. But you will understand that as you go up in your densities, it's going to come very clear to you. Oh, this is what free will is. Well, right now you think you have this free will, but it's a distortion. But that's all I can say, because it would be infringement on your development.
I have a thought about that free will. Now this is going to be about people that say, like, a child molester. That child is no free will. That child is not saying, okay, let's do this. They're taking advantage of free will of a child. So how do we how do you wrap it around your head that if we're supposed to abide by people's free will and these people aren't, so where does that leave these? How do we deal with those people that do that stuff, I'm going to call it, because we're not supposed to be evil or good or whatever. We're not supposed to put that connotation on anything. So how do you deal with that?
Well, Ross said in this session, he said about how, you know, the negatively polarized incarnated people actually have a more ability to become negatively polarized, because they can put they can take the free will from others. Their whole point is to break down that free will, and then people that are positively polarized, they want the other to make the other person to be service to others. So they it's harder for them to polarize positively, because of the fact you're always fighting against negative entities trying to get what they want. Also, then you've got the whole thing of the kid that was being abused made the choice to incarnate to receive that as catalyst in some way anyway. So
yeah, if you think about it that way, I get it. I do understand it. But nevertheless, I still have to, I guess I'm really passionate about, I'm just passionate about it because I worked with kids that had things happen to them. And so I'm really,
Can I make a comment on that?
No, of course you can.
Okay. I understand exactly what Ed was saying. And I think Ross said this, where he said that pre-incarnatively, souls will make an agreement to promote a catalyst in one or the other. Well, it's for both, but at the same time, we want to promote a positively oriented planet. So what do we do when we see what we call a crime? Because Ross says there is no good and no evil. there's balance. There's positive and negative. And so what do? Since we're positively oriented, we punish them. They get thrown in prison, and it's denounced as something horrible. And that's because we are positive, service to others oriented. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And when someone does something horribly negative like that, it has to be the only thing we can do is say, we are making an example of you, and we are making sure everyone knows this is the energy that we expect to be portrayed with all the rest of us in third density. That's just what we're doing.
Oh, if I could give an alternative to that, the what do you call it? Raw. The LL Archives mentions that the reason that we have prisons is just because we haven't figured out how to love those people. We haven't figured out how to forgive them and how to help them to become better people, and that's why we have prisons. It's an extension of our slavery of enslaving each other, and so we've enslaved these people into these boxes, and so just by forgiving and loving them and by helping them to have more healthy habits, we can help transform them into more mature souls that understand how to be kinder to other selves. Desiree?
May I speak too?
Well, Desiree has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, because
Well, actually, give it just 2 seconds, then you can go. That's what I was just going to say, because Mitch was talking about us all being able to get in what we need to say. And I don't know if everyone can see their chat box, or we could do it that way, or do exactly what I just did, raise your hand. So then before we move on, we can kind of get everybody's perspective spoken and heard, if that works for everybody else. And one more question. How the heck are you guys liking what other people are saying? I have not figured that out. And how do I do that in the darn chat? I've been using this darn thing for so long, and I'm like, I can't do it. Where is it?
There's a little picture. I'm sitting here looking at a 32-inch screen. Everybody's on.
Click the smiley.
I'm living like a high-tech wizard almost.
Yeah, but
I have a mouse. I put the cursor over what somebody said, and a little icon shows up with those pictures on it.
Damn it, mine doesn't. Oh, well, it's not important. I was just curious. But anywho, so are we good on the hand raising?
How do you put your hand up?
Well, I have mine set so it like comes up when I do this. So anybody else that doesn't do that, doesn't have that set up, can you explain to people how to do it? Yeah, mine's set up because I'm cool. Don't mind me.
There's a reaction icon down below.
Oh yeah, at the bottom.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Where it has a little plus sign with a head.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. But got it. Let me see. I gotta say her name right.
Yeah.
Where is it? Okay, Raw Priestess Aaliyah. Am I saying that correctly?
Aaliyah.
Or Aaliyah?
Aaliyah.
Sure. So I know you wanted to say something. So you can go ahead and talk now. I'm going to lower my hand.
Well, I didn't even see your hand because I sit with my eyes closed because I'm channeling Ra, and so my eyes were closed. So excuse me, I did not see your hand. What we wanted to say was the whole problem, if you want to use that word, because that's a distortion too. But the reason why you have these behaviors is simply because the veil of separateness. Once that veil of separateness falls, the whole world will change. But you're seeing results because separateness is what's being seen. And that's the effect. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I will open my eyes, but I close it because he channels. Okay.
Oh, Benny, you had your hand up?
Well, I'm gonna just talk it like this. So, my whole life from, probably like since my 18th birthday, I've been My 18th birthday, the cops came in, raided, they didn't find anything. But my whole life, I've been targeted, just by like undercover civics, undercover pickup trucks, undercover everything. Like, I can barely even leave the house without getting pulled over. So, when you're talking about, them locking people up, maybe it's just a draconian agenda. Like, for certain people, there's certain people, like when you're in jail or prison, when I experienced that, I sat there and I was like, okay, these people actually deserve to be in here. But there's other times when they just try to destroy you. It isn't really about the law of one, but I can only tell you my personal experience. So, basically at the end of the day, maybe this is just a draconian thing. And then that's all what I can tell you.
Mitch? And then
really quick, short digression here. Amanda, when you were talking, you would, kind of touched on pedophilia and all that. And you had started to make a remark and you stopped yourself. And you basically said, well, I'm just going to call it stuff because we're not supposed to put labels of good and bad and stuff. And I really do appreciate that. But I think there's also room to take a step back and recognize the goal here is not to be perfect. The goal here is not to fit ourselves into some absolutist box. What Rod does talk about is when we do make a mistake, when we catch ourselves judging somebody, be honest with yourself about that. Take a moment, reflect on it. Why did that make you uncomfortable? And going forward, what can you do to improve that? When we stop ourselves dead in the tracks, afraid to make mistakes, we inhibit our ability to progress because we don't ever allow ourselves the mistake in the first place. That's not to say go out there and do horrible things to everyone around you just because that's coming off the top of your head. But on the same token, I think just putting ourselves in this box where we feel like we have to be this beacon of light 24/7 in some ways inhibits us more than it helps us.
100%.
Ed?
Yeah, I was going to say about in the Esmeralda Sweetwater book, there's this bit where he's trying to describe how on Earth we have laws and we have these, if you do this, then all the people agree on a law, and if you do this wrong, then they put you in prison. And Esmeralda, who's like an alien kind of come down, the first thing she says is that's terrible. That infringes on the first rule of the creator, that you don't take away free will. And that's how the whole system works. What's wrong with this planet?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Good point. Fred?
Well, what I wanted to say was, with as far as what he was saying about the draconian agenda, I think that's because of the misinterpretation of us, coming from us not being able to heal correctly. We lost the ability, or have not maybe yet developed the ability to heal people correctly. And a part of it comes from what some people call ego or whatever, of not letting go of whatever it is, traditions or standards or some taboo, where I think that the majority of people in prisons that are in prisons for drugs and drug related problems, if you have an addiction like that, can be cured. And we know how to cure it with ayahuasca type treatments, with a priest or someone that a psychologist that can walk them through the process properly and healing themselves and healing their subconscious. If we did that more in prisons, our prisons system would go away. We wouldn't have the prison system that we do. We have the largest prison system pretty much anywhere in the world other than like China. And it's fueled by money and greed mostly. But more importantly, we're not helping people. And I think, like what Ross said, understanding how to properly heal is very important. We got to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive other people, or we're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to keep spinning our wheels. Does
Robert,
that make sense?
Yeah, agree. I like everyone, you're all understanding nicely. It seems like this is great. What we read tonight in 71-6, where it talks about the higher self between incarnations also works on the forgiveness of self due to missed guideposts. So our work here in the third density in this incarnation is reflected in between our incarnation by our higher self, also seeking to forgive things that it feels that it missed out on, missed opportunities and such. So it is amazing how we have these reflections between levels, and the draconian measure that we speak of, and everything here in this third density seems to be a prison of some sort, and it's under the guise of the religion of money. I mean, money is a god to so many of these people that it's ridiculous, but it's what we put up with. And we each are subscribing to some method of gaining money in our life by working, or whatever we do. We commit crimes to get it, or we inherit it, but it's the whole thing. Money itself seems to be like a prison of some kind that is self-made by humans, and we're working through it. Hopefully it doesn't destroy us.
I like the Star Trek idea of how their economy worked, where people did a job. I don't see too much money exchange.
Well, the whole point of Roddenberryism,
yeah,
or the Star Trek philosophy, is that you've got replicators and you've got
right.
free energy sources. So essentially, everyone can keep themselves alive. You don't have to worry about the challenging for resources that's so prevalent here. And at that point, we can all start working on ourselves in whatever way we want to.
Right.
Mitch?
So one of the things that I think is a somewhat valuable portion of this conversation, and it was one of the big parallels that I saw. I don't know how many of you here read Hidden Hands, but it was actually what led me into Law of One. One of the big parallels there is a lot of the evil, the bad. Money is a prison. We can use literal prisons. We can use corporations controlling our government, whatever. It's all a choice for us. We have these terrible things in front of us, and we can choose to try to be part of that exploitative system and have the riches and have the yachts and the mansions and live the high life, or we can choose to say, no, something's wrong here. That's not what I want. I want to come here. I want to work on myself. I want to help my neighbors. I want to help my neighborhood, wherever the case may be. You can look at somebody doing something terrible, still see them as a reflection of the one creator, and still be grateful for the fact that they've given you a shining example of what you want to work not to be.
That's a good outlook. You learn from what they do.
It's basically the entire law of one summed up really well there, because it's not about being good or evil, because good or evil doesn't exist. It's about whether or not you're servicing yourself or whether you're servicing others as well as yourself at the same time. So no matter what you do, even if you are that individual, and of course I'm not promoting it in any capacity, that is doing abuse to children, then these people are in some form or another pursuing interests that are in the collective for us all, because we're all part of that one original thought, that one collective. But the purpose of our being and the purpose of our existence, if we follow this train of thought, could be summed up along the lines of, it's not more so what our choice is, it's the ability for us to express our will as the divine creator through our vehicle. And by doing that, we attract the most polarization to whatever we're doing at that time, because what we're doing is we're not we're not using false virtue. We're not going, oh, I'm going to be good because Jesus told me to, or because Ra told me to. I'm not going to do this because that's the right thing to do. No, you've got to go internally and find that right thing to do. And when you find that right thing to do and you express that, that's the maximum capacity that you can have as an impact on your surrounding environment, whether that be through what we would classically call negative influences or positive influences. So very important to remember that it always comes back to you. How do you choose to see reality? What frequencies are you sending out with these choices that you make? And of course, this includes the choice of thought, which a lot of people have a lot of struggle with because they're not taught how to jump into the space between cause and reaction, to then interpret the cause before they automatically react based upon the collection of illusions and delusions that they've picked up, or subconscious. And that expression of self, when in harmony with that, is when you're truly like, pillar of light, fucking sonic wave going everywhere type of stuff, dark entities going, oh no, run away, doing all that sort of stuff.
Robert?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to circle back to the reading that catalyzed this whole evening for us, in saying how back in 71-2, it says in this density, the increase in the serving to others or the serving of self will almost inevitably increase the ability of an entity to enjoy a higher intensity of life. So it says serving the self or serving to others, you can enjoy higher intensity of light. So the light is there regardless. So choose your path. Let's become polarized and let's enjoy a good harvest sooner than later.
Fred?
This was kind of tying into what Trevor was saying. So I kind of had a question. So it's my understanding that when we end this life, when we enter time space, the karma, the whatever you want to call it, karmic, that you've collected and the choices that you missed, that you're forgiven for, and you realize the choices that you missed once you enter time space, and then you choose to reincarnate. My understanding is that you're more inclined in some way to continue with those catalysts to make those choices, to hopefully this time make the right choices. So my question goes back to, is it beneficial then for us to understand what our past lives are, because that's going to help us understand the mistakes we made before?
But they say that's a lot of it is taking away your free will, because if you know what's going to happen, then your free will is already compromised. So not knowing, you have more of a free will, so to speak.
No. Okay, let me scramble your brain for 1 second. It's my free will right now to choose to know that knowledge. And
Right.
Once I get that knowledge, it's my free will to do what I want with it.
I get that.
Do you know what I mean? So it's free will. It's kind of like that equality debate. Like, well, it either is equal or it's not. It's free will or it's not. So free will's free will. So free will goes all the way around.
Andre?
Yeah, Fred, in answer to your question, it depends on you. And if you feel within yourself that it is the right thing for you to remember your past life to help you with your current life, then that is the right thing to do. And in terms of what Amanda was saying, they did say that if you don't remember your past life, it's kind of like extra level of difficulty, and you've managed to pass the level with this higher level of difficulty. But it doesn't ultimately matter. The main thing in terms of like, I know you mentioned doing the right thing, and so if you're on the service to others path, the I guess the correct thing is to open your heart and then let your heart decide what to do.
Is there an award for doing it with an extra level of difficulty? I'm just curious. I'm asking for a friend. No.
I don't know.
Anybody else? Because we're kind of getting closer in time that have any last things they want to say before we have Robert close us out.
My dog wanted to know the answer to that question. I'm just kidding.
He's like, my dog wanted to know. No, nobody. Well, I appreciate all you guys and your feedback. Robert, if you don't mind closing us out, this will be posted later. Probably not today though, because I get sidetracked. Maybe tomorrow.
I do not mind doing this. I actually appreciate it highly. I love the fact that we all can come together like this. And I truly am grateful we can do this. This is amazing to be able to come together from around the world, different hemispheres even. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Creator, for expressing yourself through all of us in such a fashion, and that our love may grow and grow, and that we can form the perfect social memory complex that is to be. And let us go forth into our daily lives expressing you, Creator, all the more in love and gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. Love you all. Have a great week, even though I swear I wake up and it's Friday again. I'm like, what is this time thing that you speak of? It does not exist.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.